Welcome to The Art of Being Unstoppable, the podcast where women from every walk of life come together to break barriers, embrace their power, and live life on their own terms. I'm your host, Vicki McDougall, and each week we explore inspiring stories, actionable strategies, and empowering conversations to help you step into your confidence, amplify your voice, and create a life without limits. No matter where you are on your journey, this is your space to grow, thrive, and become unstoppable. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Art of Being Unstoppable. And today I have just this beautiful person that I met. And, our paths crossed and we could have talked for hours, because it was just like, I don't know, it's like we connected and we knew each other forever. So this is Giselle D'Souza. And you live in California, correct?
I do. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think it's the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. For all of us Canadians that don't know where that, where in California. But yes, so I am so happy to have you here. You have quite an empowering story, of resilience and just what you're capable of creating, even when you're, struck by adversity or, those roadblocks that sometimes get in our way. So I know that this is kind of just like overall, but what like, what gave you that? What part of your life do you really look at that was probably one of the lower parts that catapulted you into feeling the way that you feel about accomplishing what you can accomplish? Like, did that begin for you?
I mean, oh my goodness. I
Right?
think there's, yeah, I think there's so much. I mean, definitely, the way I was brought up was, a huge part of it. My parents came here. They weren't from here. They were immigrants. They came in the late 50s. So, they defeated so many odds. And I think growing up with that, you kind of knew no matter what you put your mind to, you can get through it.
Yeah.
And then I have, that was a big part of it. I grew up with faith. So faith for me was really big too. I always felt like no matter what I went through, there's always a reason for it. I never felt like anything happened to me. I think it helped happen for me. Um, but at a very young age, I have two phenomenal girls that are going to be, one's, early 30s and one's late 20s. But I basically met their dad my junior summer in high school. And, by senior year, and we did not go to the same school, but he basically had cancer and wasn't supposed to have children. He wasn't supposed to survive. I think that was a pretty time in my life that was really young to have to go
Mhm.
through something so monumental, I guess. And you know, we basically were together for 7 years. We got married, we had children. And unfortunately, I realized that some people, when they're going through something like that, either make their lives better or feel like maybe they are owed something.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, our relationship, I was with him for 7 years, it started getting emotionally abusive, and I left right when I saw that it was going to go physically abusive. So, I think at that moment, I was pretty young still. I mean, if you do the math, 17, 24, I was with him, and I decided that, there's more to life. I didn't want to raise my girls in that kind of atmosphere. And I wanted them to understand that this is not how they should be treated.
Mhm.
I would say
Yep.
that was a really hard moment because a lot of people ask me, like, well, why didn't you leave sooner? And unless you're in that situation, you don't truly understand. It's not an
Mhm.
easy way out. There's a lot of threats. There's, basically, um, if if you leave me, I'm going to find you, and
Yeah.
basically I'm going to take care of you, and
Yeah.
I'll still have the girls. So it was, pretty intense. And so I had to kind of figure out a way out of that situation. He basically said, "Yeah, I'll kill you and I'll have the girls still." And it was a lot and it was intense. And I grew up in a really great family full of love and knew what that was like, and never really needed for anything growing up. I came from a huge family of, we are very driven and we work
Mhm.
really hard for what we have. And, we have all of us have an amazing work ethic. So it wasn't at all that was, a part of it. But, I was just like, I need to leave this situation. And, my kids were 1 and 4 when I left. And if,
Yeah.
I had a moment and my daughter was 1 years old and I was laying in bed with her and we just, we got in a disagreement. He was really, really upset and I kind of tried to diffuse the situation, went upstairs and, we had, a brand new home and went upstairs and all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I just knew like there was something he was coming and I just protected my daughter and shielded her and he flipped the mattress and that's when I knew this was going to go to physical and I had to leave and if he was going to put my daughter at risk then I knew that where could this go from there. So,
Right.
at that moment I knew I needed to leave,
Mhm.
and I just had to kind of place when that could be, when can I do it with him not there? And there's a
Yeah,
lot to that story. I mean, I didn't write on it.
absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
that was a moment that, and I went to my 4-year-old at the time and, I was crying and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?" And, she looked at me and she said, "Mom, one day we'll get out of this." And I just knew like this is the time. Like I need to
Yeah.
now plan that.
And I
So
that
I'd say that's
story,
that was probably a low point.
yeah, and you sharing that, like, even though it happened, like you said, how your daughter was 4 and she's what, 30, some 30s now. Um,
Mhm.
that's it's still a vulnerable thing to talk about. I think women who haven't been in an abusive relationship can assume it not, and I don't mean all women, and I please don't, I'm not putting anybody down, but what I'm saying is that for someone to ask you, and I kind of going back to what you said because it stuck with me, why didn't you leave sooner? It's never as easy as
Mhm.
black and white. We choose to do what we choose to do because that's where we are at the time. And it isn't until we grow like in within ourselves that we realize we can stop things sooner, or we can remove ourselves from a situation. But when you're that young and he's the love of your life and you have 2 children together, you don't
Mhm.
see it that way. You just don't. And there's no right or wrong, and no one has no one, there's no answer to the question of why didn't you leave sooner? There just isn't. And I really believe that anyone listening to your story should understand that, because there is help. You were lucky to be able to remove yourself from that situation with your girls. Some people aren't as lucky. Some people are more isolated for whatever the reason is. But I really believe that it's part of the growth that you went through to get to where you are today, because your girls are both very strong, driven girls as well. And you didn't
Mhm.
allow that to stop you. You kept going and you created so much for yourselves in your life. Like, like, I really want you to share some of the things, because that was your first husband, right?
Yeah, so, I come from a family, my parents were married for 53 years before my dad passed. So I came from, both my brothers are married. One of my brothers got married when I was 12. I just turned 51. I have no problem saying my age. I feel like really young. So I feel like, not age is just a number.
Absolutely, girl.
But, I came from, a family full of, long-term marriages. So,
Yeah,
yes, it was my first husband. And, I just knew that there was more out there for me, and I didn't feel like, I just knew God had a bigger
yeah,
plan for me, and I knew that, there was so much more yet to achieve. And is it scary? Yes. Did I know, I never thought I'd want was gonna raise my kids by myself, and that's
no,
kind of what happened. Financially, I had to take care of them, physically, I had to take care of them, but it was also the alternative of what my life could have been if I stayed. And I'm really truly blessed. I do have a lot of love around me, a lot of just amazing family and friends and, people. It's important to have a huge support system,
yes.
whether it's in your career or personally. It is really, really huge.
And you had said you have a strong faith as well. So if that is with your church, if that is with a community group, whatever it is, but having that support system is key, because you're not alone and you don't have to do this alone. And when I said about
True.
your being your first husband, I didn't mean it like, "Oh, and that was just that." I didn't mean it like that. I hope it didn't come across as that way, because that's not what I meant.
No, no,
But
no,
I
no,
mean,
not at all.
when we talked about this before, it was like, girl, and look at you. You show up and you are vibrant and you are honest as the day. Your being is unstoppable. And you are someone that women need to understand that this is possible for you too, because you
Mhm.
created this life for you and your family. You did that. And that is just, you know, an amazing thing. So tell me a little bit about what happened after you were raising your girls and you were doing your thing and
Yeah, so pretty much at the time we had a family business. So, he was doing his own thing in his profession. I was in mine. I started managing a business at 18, so I was really young anyways as it was. Had my older daughter 2 months away from being 20, so I was really, 19. Like I said, we didn't expect that I was gonna be able to have children, just because of his cancer
Mhm,
diagnosis. But I felt like that was, big blessings. And, I always told myself that, God, I know I'm going through this because I know that I can handle it. I'm trying to think the exact wording right now, but and I kept telling myself this, that I'm going through things because God knows I can handle this, right? Like,
yep,
I'm stronger than maybe even at times I believe. But after I left, I'm like, okay, you know what? I got this. And because of the family business, that was a big part. But I worked really long hours, and I helped in that situation. But I knew I wanted to be that strong female. I wanted my girls to see that you can do things on your own. You don't Somebody should add to your life. It's not that, it should be a team. I do truly, truly
mhm,
believe that. It should
yep,
be a team. But I wanted them to know that no matter what, you can do this on your own, and that you're strong enough, and not to let something or someone tell you what your life should consist of, because I was told that, I would
yeah,
never amount to anything. What would I do without him? Right? Those are things that people are told, whether male or female.
mhm,
And I wanted to defeat all the odds. And when I knew the moment I left that I wasn't probably going to have any help. And I was like, okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to have this family business, and we're going to, you know, just be very driven in making sure my
yeah,
girls had the best life that I could afford, to do for them at the time. And, went into property management shortly after that, on top of that, and kind of just was really, really blessed to be able to raise my girls and give them, all that I could, at that time. And my girls still say to this day, they go, Mom, you gave us everything that you could. And you know what? We couldn't have asked for anything more. And the life that we have is because of everything you've given us. And so, but they are also very driven too. So I feel
mhm,
like it's been such a blessing. And I tell them the same: make sure you can take care of yourself. And, when you get down that road, you want to make sure somebody complements your life, doesn't
yes,
really take away from it. It'd be a team effort.
absolutely.
So that's
That
that part. So it depends on where you want me to go.
Well, I wanna respond to what you just said too. My mom's day, even in my day, like, even I mean, I'm a little bit older than you as well, but even when I was young, it was about getting married, having children. That was kind of what we did. And to raise our children to be, no, you do it and he will compliment you and you're a team is the way that, you know, it's just makes so much sense. Why wasn't that always the way it was, right? So now we're saying it, but people still don't live that. People still don't. They still believe that they need someone else or they need something else. It's always over there with somebody else that's going to help me, help me, help me. But no, we have to know that we're capable of doing whatever we need to do ourselves. It comes from in here and we get to do that. It's our choice. And you made choices. They weren't easy choices.
Mhm.
I'm sure that the road wasn't always easy. I'm sure you had some down times and some, really sad moments and really great moments, but it's all part of the process. Like you said, God's not giving you anything you can't handle.
Right, right. I mean, and I think that's a big part of it. I do have to say, growing up, I did see my parents start a business, and, like I said, the family business. But my mom, by the time my younger brother and I were born, she was at home. She was still handling things for the business, but then she kind of went into her she kind of leaned into my dad and she goes, I have this idea. I want to start, building and doing some constructions. I've been in real estate pretty much almost my whole life. But, she went and as a team, they built what they built, but it was together. And so I always saw my mom being a powerhouse. She was, you
Yeah.
know, buying properties and subcontracting, these developments. And so for me, I don't know anything different than seeing my parents build, be a team. So I think that's just like in my blood that I truly believe that. But I feel like, my mom complimented my dad and my dad complimented my mom. And I feel like that's where, I tell my girls it should be a team effort and you should complement each other. And because I think growing up seeing that they did do that. And my mom kind of did her career. My dad did, his, and they both kind
Yeah.
of meshed together really well. I mean, that's a big, big part of it.
Yeah, it is. And but we all get it's still our choice. At the end of the day, we still get to make the choices that we make, and you chose to make that choice. And so
Yeah.
that's the first part of your story. Now let's get to the second part. Let's talk about the next part.
Yeah, it's so funny. My friends always saying, you should probably have a movie. Because,
Absolutely, you should. You really,
um,
really should. And but by in saying that though, she has got a book. So we're going to talk about that book as well. But let's talk about this part of the story first.
yeah. So, I raised my kids and was it always easy? No, I don't want it to sound like it was easy. I mean, it wasn't. There's times I had to be like, okay, I choose to do this because I can't do it all because right financially, you're
Yeah,
raising two kids and
yeah,
there's things I couldn't do. Some of the things I do now, I'm blessed to do now because I remember how I couldn't do that before.
yeah,
So I do want to put that out there. It wasn't always easy. It's not like there wasn't like a silver spoon, right? Like I had to work
yeah,
really hard to what I had. And I also had to compromise. Like I could give my kids this, but then they couldn't have this, right?
yeah.
I couldn't buy something for myself because I had to provide for them. So I want to make sure that's, you know, out there. So I probably my daughter it was about 5 years later. It did take, quite a bit of time just to heal and get through all of that because there was a lot that happened. And I did look internal. I look internal too because I'm like, I look at the relationship as a whole. I look at it individually. What could have been better? Where do I feel like, where could it have been better? But then also, what are the faults? And it's not just one sided. I mean, even when I wrote the book, I in no way ever play a victim. I think everything happens for a reason. I truly, truly
Hmm.
believe that. I would say it's God's plan. So that is, definitely a part of how I think on things. And so I spent that time to heal and get through the things that I needed to get through. Shortly after, I'm about 29 at this point. I meet soon to be my second husband, which is so crazy for me to say because I never thought I'd be married
No,
twice.
me
That's for
either.
sure. But like I
Me
said,
either.
everything happens for a reason and it
That's
makes for a
right.
really good story.
Yes.
um so we're together for a while. We eventually get married and we're blending a family. I had two girls, he had two girls. He had a business in my town. I had my businesses going on. I sell a business. We kind of merged a little bit. I still have a whole property management company, always had that never really changed. Had that pretty much my whole life. But I turned 40 and, without getting into all of that, but I'm skipping
Hmm.
to when I turned 40. So I turned 40 in January and I'm like, great, it's my 40th. Like, I'm ready. New decade. 30s were good. They're great. Okay, let's go with 40. I turned 40 in January. By March, my younger daughter is diagnosed with Lyme disease. So if you're not familiar with Lyme disease, it can affect, people always ask me, how does it affect her? It can affect pretty much everything in her body. And it can be very, very traumatic. It can be debilitating. I mean, there's times I would see her walking and she's young. She's diagnosed basically in her sophomore, junior-ish
Oh,
year. But so that was a hard hit. I remember getting that call from a friend of mine who's a doctor who had done the test and he's like, her levels are like through the roof. And as a mom, it was heartbreaking. I
Well,
never wanted her to go through that. You got to understand too. I had seen my ex-husband go through cancer. I was there through all of that, and seeing him go into remission. Um, I was like, oh my gosh, it's not the life that, of course, I would want anybody to go through, but let alone my daughter.
mhm.
So that was definitely, a really hard hit. That was in March. In May, I found out that my husband at the time had an affair off and on for 2 years, and I was blindsided. Everybody was blindsided. How I found out wasn't the best either because basically, there was a lawsuit that was happening, against him because of it. So I won't get too much into detail on that, but
Yep,
that's how I kind of
yep,
found out, and I basically had to approach him and ask him if it was true. Because I didn't know off and on for 2 years he had a whole other life going on. I just didn't, and I know it sounds crazy, but that's a fact. So anyway, so I approached him and he did admit, yes. And yeah, it was going on and off
mm,
for, 2 years. And a lot of times when I would leave out of town to visit my daughter in school, it was just, there was things going on when I was here. There was things going on when I was gone. Just basically that's what was happening. And I'm just like, oh my God, like just, I like got married again. Didn't think that I'd be in this situation.
and this is just 2 months after your daughter's been diagnosed with Lyme disease.
Yeah. I mean,
2
she went
months.
through a severe concussion. Yeah, 2 months. I mean, she went through a severe concussion before that in a high school sport. She was playing lacrosse and I was basically, at a conference and I got a call from her coach saying, she just got laid out playing lacrosse and she doesn't know what day it is. And I got back on a flight, rushed back home. And so she had about a year of rehab for that. She couldn't remember family members. She couldn't remember the ABCs. Like, it was
Oh
almost
my
like she went back to almost
goodness.
being 5, and so we went into rehab for about a year on that, and then we found out that the Lyme resurfaced. Basically, she had the Lyme disease, which can sit dormant, but if there's a severe trauma to your body, it could bring it to the surface, and that's what happened to her. So we went through a whole year of rehab for that, and she's, doing phenomenal now and did after that, and it took time, but then when she got diagnosed with Lyme, we're like, it made sense why some things weren't getting better.
Right.
So that was March. May, I found out about the affair. June, my dad had some heart issues, but he went in for surgery. And if he didn't go into surgery, he probably wouldn't have survived because his heart was at like 15%. Of that's how much of the heart was actually working. So he went into surgery for June. And if you know me, I'm like father daughter, like relationship is like on steroids with us because I had the most phenomenal relationship with my dad. It's something that was hard for me with my girls is that they never really got that. And that was unfortunate for me. His situation of where he was at, he just never really could give that to them. So it broke my heart because I know how that strong that could be and how amazing
Yeah.
that is.
Yes,
But luckily,
absolutely.
my girls were surrounded by some really strong males, which was my dad and my 2 brothers. So June, my dad went in the hospital. July, he passed, and that was devastating. The light in July was that my nephew was born, and it was such a God-given gift. I think we needed that at the time. August, my daughter went into the hospital for a month and a half because of health issues. And by the end of that year, December, my nephew was medevaced in because he was in a climbing accident and didn't know if he was going to survive. And that literally all happened the year that I turned 40. And I just remember looking up and going, okay, God, all right, one more thing. Okay, we got this. There's a reason. There's a reason. And I kept having to remind myself. But just also to put into perspective, my girls knew what was happening in my marriage. My younger brother, because I had turned to him, but no, and our family and our friends knew, like our close friends of him and I, because we had some mutual friends, knew. Everybody was blindsided. They didn't see this. Like, his office didn't see it. Like, it was just one of those things. But um, I literally kept it quiet because I didn't want us mourning my dad, stuff going on with my daughter, right? Like, I wanted it to be about them, especially the mourning of my dad. I wanted everything to be about him, and I didn't wanna pull away from what we were going through. So, I mean, truly, my family didn't know until January the following year of basically I was leaving, and, I was moving on and what had happened, and everybody was shocked. But at the same time, I just felt like I knew I'd get through this, and I knew there was a reason, and I couldn't I couldn't get past it, and I also just had to look at what was happening, and I was like, "Hey, all right, Giselle, what are we doing here? What are we gonna be doing?" And mind you, I'm helping manage his company. So it was one of those things, and like I said, I still had the property manager. So financially, I was still doing well,
Right.
and making my own money, and then working with him. But, there were some things that were said, and like, you're never gonna have the life that you have with me. You're not basically kind of some of the same things I had heard before. And I'm
Mhm.
like, no. And I was like, no, I'm gonna have, and literally I just remember in my head thinking, no, I'm gonna have a better life. I'm gonna do more things, and I'm gonna have
Yeah.
a a lot better life, and I'm gonna do all the things I've always wanted to do that maybe I didn't do. And I always wanted to do some things that going into real estate, and there was other things I wanted to start accomplishing. And he was like, well, what about the office? Like, what about this? What about that? And I was just like, you know what? This is time for me to like thrive. And so I just had to
Yes.
pretty much the same thing. And it's like, okay, I'm going from this office, and now where am I going in my career, and what's next? And I can't even tell you, since I left, it was like, I left, that was 2015 when I turned 40, and 2016 by January, I was already talking to my family that I was leaving, and it was time for me to move on. And, I was already planning on getting my real estate license, and it was just like, okay, let's go, and I wasn't gonna let that what he decided and what he was saying, like, dictate who I was or what I was capable of. It was, and I think that's always been the thing. It's always been like, okay, I'm just gonna become stronger and better, and I'm gonna learn from it, and if I can share it with my stories with anybody, and it can help literally one person, then it
Yes.
was well worth it. I don't think our stories are meant to be kept internally. I think we're supposed to share them as hard as it can be, and I'm an open book. If people ask me, you know, questions about
Yeah.
my past, I have no problem discussing it if it can help, another person.
And you saying that is really, really important for people to hear because like you said, you raised your girls despite
Mhm.
what they've been through without their dad, and then, knowing what that your second husband had done, and they probably considered him like a father because you were with him for quite some time, right? So they had some sort of bond, plus they had sisters, whatever that looks like. But you went through all of that in 1 year. 1 year.
Mhm.
Your baby girl, your nephew, and being as close as you are to your family, that is huge. And not being able to share because of you losing your dad, your person, that one person that was that person for you your whole entire life. And I mean,
Yeah.
when I lost my dad, I get it. I do. And I lost my mom too very shortly after. And I feel like the loss of both of them has been really hard, but my dad being my dad, and I was a daddy's girl as well, that hits so much different. So much different. And you endured all of that in 1 year and then had the courage to say goodbye and move on. Now, did you
Yeah,
ever find yourself in a place of, I can't do this? Did you ever find yourself there? Or did you always have the faith to believe that God's doing this or not God, whatever God has planned for me, I can handle because he knows I can? Is that the way that's your faith and that's what's helped you get through?
Yeah, I have spoken on stages, and I do share my story, and that is a question I get. And yes, I mean, honestly, I am really blessed that I grew up in faith because, people are always like, well, I don't understand how you got through all that. Like, how did you do
Yeah.
it? And I was like, I never did it by myself. Does it take a lot of like a huge mindset? Of course. But I had to truly believe that there was like light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how dark it was. And I had to truly believe that there was a purpose and there was something behind it. And I've told my girls this, and they've probably heard me say this so many times, but there's a learning lesson in everything. And I
Mhm.
also say, no matter what, you have to love like you've never been hurt. And is it hard? Of course it's hard. Is it easy for things to maybe come into play, like, every once in a while it'll come into your mind, but, like, you have to release that and you gotta let it go. I mean, still to this day, I always tell my girls, like, if you've been hurt from a boyfriend or, like, for me, right, like an ex-husband, you just have to remember that this new person is nobody from your past, right? This is a new person that you've been gifted to know, to love, and people say hopeless romantic. Maybe that's who I am, but I just truly believe that I like to see everybody in kind of God's light. Like, I believe everybody has good. Maybe they're struggling. Did I try to help the girl's dad multiple times to help him through the demons he
Yeah.
was fighting? He did go into like addiction, and he did have some, he had addictions that I didn't even know at the time. I mean, there was times I didn't even touch on. He wouldn't come home at night. I had two girls at home by myself. I worked all day and coming home,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't show up. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he was alive. I didn't know if he was dead. Like, all of those things. And, but I just had a brand new baby. Like, do you leave? Like, do you stay? So,
Yeah.
I truly believe the best in everybody. And maybe, people say that's a fault, but I don't know. Is that a fault? I do believe everybody, and deep down, everybody they want to do the best. Maybe they can't. Maybe there's circumstances, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I truly
I
believe
agree.
that we need more love in the world, and I think we
That's
need to
right.
share that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do agree.
But
I
faith
do
has been
agree.
huge, huge,
Which
huge
is
for me, yeah.
amazing. It is. It's
Mhm.
a lifeline that people don't realize that is there and it's offered, right? We all have it. We all have the ability to have that, right?
Yeah,
And
and yeah, and yeah, oh, sorry.
no, 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 go ahead.
No, and I think, whenever you feel like you can't do it, maybe tap into your why, like, what's your why? For me, it's always been, like, even when you don't speak, there's people watching, right? Your
Mhm.
children are watching what you do, how you act. You cannot even say anything, but they're watching your demeanor, all of the things. My kids, they know me so well. I know them so well. And it's just like it's not just leaving a legacy. I think that's one of my biggest things. It's living a legacy also.
Mhm.
It's so important how you live also, and like what you're giving to other people. I think that's huge in itself, to be honest with you. And, it's not just what you speak, but it's how you act, and what are what are you doing? Especially when it comes to your children. I mean, it's important. I never spoke bad about their father. I let them make the decision whether they were going to have a relationship with him or not. I mean, he was only in their life a handful of times, but I never said this is what you should do. I let them decide. And at one point it was, my daughter decided that he unfortunately was hurting them more than loving them. I mean, he just wouldn't
Mhm.
show up when he said he would, and
Yeah,
in the few times, and it's hard.
it is.
And I think that's a big thing. I think, going through divorce, if I have anything to say to anybody, I know we all have you have opinions, but it's if there's children involved, it's really, really important to just keep that internally, because I don't think it's fair. And honestly, they're going to get old enough and they're going to figure it out. And you just have to trust in that, because in the end of the day, they're not going to dislike the other person. They're going to dislike you because you're putting them in that situation. And I do have friends that know I've been through it, and they're like, what's some advice? And I say, that's probably one of the biggest things. And don't be fearful. Know that you literally can accomplish anything you put your mind to. You really, really can. And I know it sounds like, oh yeah, like the rah rah, but you really truly can,
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
I mean, you're living proof of that. Obviously, what you've gone through and your faith has gotten you here. And to have the strength from within, I think that that itself, when you can, like, you looked at your 40th year, like, this is going to be my year, right? Like we always do. Like those big milestones, this
Yeah.
is going to be my year. I'm going to be 40 and woohoo, right? And then you're blindsided, but
Mhm.
you still keep going and you keep thriving and you keep striving for more. And those little steps that you've taken all along those way has brought you to where you are, regardless of if you were knocked back 5 steps, during that time or not. It brought you here. And the strength that you can share with others to know that this is possible, it is possible. What you said is true. What you said, and if you can take one thing away is your kids will know if you're going through a divorce. Your kids will make their own choices. As long as you are true
Mhm.
to who you are and you don't like, there's no use throwing shade on someone else. There really isn't. I never did that with
No, and
my
I
children.
think yeah, and I think just give them love. I mean, my girls, they know, like, pretty much every time I talk to them on the phone, they're gonna hear "I love you," and every
Yep.
time I see them, I'm gonna give them a kiss and a hug. Like, that's how I grew up too, right? Like,
Yes.
it affection and love and knowing, like, and letting them know, like, "I'm so proud of you," and it just it's so important. Words and affection to me are so important, but, it's all of that, and is it hard to recreate yourself? Yes. I mean, I recreated myself, right? I sold a business. I had to recreate myself, right? I
Yeah.
went into a business that I thought, okay, it's going to be like I had the property management. Now I'm in business with him. Like, oh, this is going to be great, right? But then that happened. And it was like, okay, well, now what's the next thing that I'm going to
Yeah.
do? And, then I built a real estate, now I'm in real estate and I'm a realtor and I do a real estate team. And, but I'm doing all these things. And I wrote, a couple chapters in a book about my story with their dad to empower other people. Like, just because you're through the darkness does not mean there's not light. Your life can be 100 times better than you ever thought it could be. And I count my blessings literally every single day. I count my blessings every single day. I'm grateful for where I'm at today. Um, and I'm right, became an author. I speak
Yes.
on stages, and I don't say that at all to like brag about myself, but I'm literally letting you know you can do anything you put your
Yes.
mind to. Anything. My daughter and I, we went to a conference right before COVID, um, and we walked on fire. If you told me I was going to walk on fire, I would say insane. And I don't need to, plug any conference, but and I realized that whole thing was a mindset. We are walking on
Yeah.
hot coals. I was like, oh, I'm gonna burn my feet. But you know what? I couldn't show her fear. And her and I did it for like 3 days, and it was long days. And at the end, you walk on coal, and it's a whole mindset
Mhm.
thing. And it just that whole thing reiterated to me everything is mindset. Like, if I can walk on hot coals as they're putting them on and I'm walking on it,
Yeah.
it truly, truly is. Your mind is so
Yes.
powerful, and we have to stop
Absolutely.
telling ourselves we cannot accomplish things when
That's
we
it.
truly can. We just have to have that faith and conviction that I'm doing this and I'm not letting anybody tell me no. So,
That's it. That is awesome. Let's talk about your book. I had said we were going to talk about that. I'd love for you, I know you have it with you, show us your book, but everything that you need to know about Giselle is going to be in our show notes as well. But this book is something to read if you want to hear more about her. And her story and other stories, because you have a couple chapters in there. And is it other women who have shared stories as well?
yes. So basically what she does is she, every I would say every year, but she releases books and she'll interview, multiple women. I think she said at the time there's a couple hundred women. And then she chooses it's really important to make sure that if you've gone through some hardships that you're kind of like through it because it's easier to
Yes.
write because you really can go back and relive your past, which can isn't always easy.
No.
I definitely asked my girls, like, are you okay with me doing this? This is what I'm thinking. And they knew I was eventually gonna write my story. But I
Uh-huh.
also want to make sure they were graduated out of school. Like they were like
Yeah.
full on adults before they gave me the okay. So that's what I decided to do. And then she narrows it down to 10 women, end up only 9 women because one of the females, she couldn't finish writing her story. I think it just was too much. So yeah, so there's other women in there. It could be anywhere from like their dad was an alcoholic to mine was about, abuse. So it's
Yeah.
just different stories in there. It's okay to value me was the book
Yeah.
I was in. And so
Awesome.
there's just a couple of chapters about their dad and I, and, just me discussing how it wasn't easy for me to leave and but why I did. And it's in no way to make him look bad. I mean, obviously he was
Mm-mm.
struggling through things, but it's more just coming from a place of this happened. It is what it is. I have two phenomenal, beautiful girls that I am thankful for every day. And that's just the journey I was on. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's don't be invisible, be fabulous. So you can find it.
It's
It
okay
should
to
be on
value
it's
me.
like Amazon seller. But yeah, I mean, there you go.
We will definitely put
I
the
don't
link in there. Thank you for sharing that because it is important. And
yeah.
I hear this more and more. When we tell our story, it helps us heal. When we keep it in, it just festers and it just creates more and more. But when we can share it and come from a place of love, because we have to love ourselves first. And once we get the, pardon me, and we can share it from there, it opens so many doors, and you have so much more to offer yourself and to offer others. And you sharing today was so important for me, for people to hear your story, because I see you as somebody that people can, I know you don't say this because of any other reason than to help, but helping people is what we're all about. And I hope more women stand up like you do and share their story to help others so that they can get through the hard times too. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. I'm so blessed and so grateful that I was able to be here and share my story. And yeah, don't I'm very transparent. Like I said, share your story. I mean, don't worry about judgment. I think nowadays people are so worried about being judged. And I think that
Yeah.
honestly, there's so many people you can help. And if you think about it, I mean, my story, maybe there's some things that people wouldn't talk about, but at the same time, how can I help people if I'm not just truly who I am and
Honest.
show you, you
Mhm.
know, the honesty and like, yeah, I went through two, failed marriages, but that doesn't mean that's who I am. It doesn't define who
Mm-mm.
I am, but yet
No.
too, it's catapulted me to do so many things
Mhm.
because of it. And, there's so much more out there. And, I have a person now in my life that I love dearly. And, there's amazingness that still is yet to come in your life. So don't
Absolutely.
second guess yourself.
Thank you. That's a beautiful way to end this podcast, because I could not have said it better myself. Thank you so much again, Giselle. And I hope, listening to this, you please share this with someone that you may think is struggling, or you may see some similarities there, or even if it's yourself, reach out. Giselle's information is going to be in the show notes, as well as you can reach out to me and I can hook you up with somebody as well. But take care of yourselves, everyone, and have yourselves a beautiful day. Thanks,
Thank you,
Giselle.
everyone.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Art of Being Unstoppable. Remember, your story matters, your voice matters, and your power is limitless. If you love today's conversation, subscribe, share it with the women in your life, and leave a review to help more women discover their unstoppable selves. I'm Vicki McDougall, and I'll see you in the next episode, because your journey to unstoppable starts now.